Even in Gen 2, Mewtwo is basically the strongest Pokemon in the game. You can say yes, it has the same stat total as Lugia and Ho-Oh, but the fact that it learns so many different moves and has so much type coverage generally means that Mewtwo is still kind of the king in this generation, at least in my opinion. But it also had access to a kind of unique held item, at least if it had ever actually been available as a wild Pokemon in the game, because you would have found your Mewtwo holding the Berzerk Gene, a held item that is immediately consumed at the start of battle, doubling your attack stat effectively by boosting it 2 stages, but then also causing your Pokemon to be confused for 256 turns. So unlike normal confusion where you have a chance to snap out of it within just a couple turns, no, this Pokemon is basically permanently confused as soon as you encounter it in battle. And that can have some pretty huge implications in a solo challenge, because when you hit yourself in confusion, you actually use your own attack and defense stats in order to calculate how much damage you would do. Mewtwo, sitting at 110 base attack, effectively is on par with Pokemon like Snorlax in terms of physical attacks, and when you consider that the attack stat is effectively being doubled, it means that it's going to do an awful lot of damage to itself whenever it does hit itself, and that's a 50-50 chance because you're never going to snap out of confusion here. So the only upside is that potentially your physical attacks could do a lot more to your opponents, and as we go through the game, we will get a decent number of good physical moves. It's just a question of if we're ever going to actually be able to use them. Add on that we're in the slow level up group with this one, it might not matter that we have the best stats in the game. Mewtwo might actually turn into a nightmare run. There's only one way to find out though, so let's get into this. So here as we step into Professor Elm's lab, we are going to find the most rage-filled Pokemon in the history of the franchise, something that makes a Dunsparce look calm by comparison. That's right, it's time for the Berserk Mew. Mewtwo that is running with only the Berzerk Gene permanently put on this Pokemon for the entire run. This is possibly the dumbest run I've ever done on this channel, but I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it actually turns out. And in order to stick with our theme of being kind of a berserker here, we're going to run with a slightly modded moveset. Our Mewtwo is going to come in knowing Rage, a Gen 1 TM move, and since Confusion and Disable were legit moves for Mewtwo in Gen 1, you could simply trade this Pokemon to a Gen 1 cartridge, teach it Rage, and trade it back, slap on that Berzerk Gene, and now we have our Pokemon to run the entire game with. Now, Rage is so weak compared to Confusion that I don't think it's actually going to be that good in the early game, but we will have situations where we come up against, say, a Dark type and we need a move that can actually hit them, and that's where Rage or some other physical move later on will definitely be part of our strategy. It's still probably going to be better to go with our special moves most of the time though. We're just going to kind of have to see. It's also worth noting that we really don't want to take too many turns in battles. We want to knock out opponents in as few hits as possible, just because every additional turn is another 50% chance of hitting ourselves, and that could make what is normally an incredibly easy fight actually become insanely inconsistent. And in order to test that out, let's start by just seeing how this Mewtwo does against rival number 1. So here against the rival, I think the best strategy is to go with Confusion, because while yes, we're doubling our attack stat, Rage is still very weak, but at the start of battle, the Berzerk Gene activates and our attack goes way up, but we get confused, and now we're going to have to just see if we can actually land hits. So we go Confusion turn 1, it does about half, and then the next turn we actually manage to move as well. That's about a 1 in 4 chance that you will just hit 2 turns in a row. So anytime that we have a 2-hit KO on an opponent, that's basically the odds that we're looking at. A 1 in 4 chance to get the 2 hits without ever hitting ourselves in Confusion, and of course in those cases I would expect that we're going to get through just fine. And since the rival went down really easy, I'm just going to name him Giovanni, because just like in the last one, Mewtwo's whole rage at the world, at least in the anime, kind of stemmed from the way that it was treated while it was being developed and who was kind of pushing that development? Of course, it was Giovanni, and that suggests that our Mewtwo is out to get some rage-filled revenge on Team Rocket as we go through this one. It's going to be really sad if we actually lose some fights to them. Now, of course, just the rules for this one, we are running on max DVs, the same as the other Pokemon that I've done in this series with held items, and we are running on minimum battles as much as we can. Of course, if we run into something that is a wall, especially considering the 50-50 chance of just hitting ourselves in confusion, we might actually have to give up on some fights and take optional battles at some point. But even optional battles aren't going to be great when we're just repeatedly hitting ourselves in confusion all the time. Outside of that, I will generally be trying to save rare candies for the late game, especially for just before red. Being in the slow level up group, I think we're going to need them. But outside of that, I'm just basically going to try to do the best strategy I can think of at any point. I may make mistakes. If you see one, tell me in the comments. But for now, we have made it to Falkner's gym, and we're ready to take on Honest Abe. Now, the Honest Abe fight typically would be super easy. Just use a couple of confusions here, I think, and you win. But here we're confused, and we hit ourselves in confusion turn 1. We did 9 damage to ourselves, and then we get a critical hit from the Spearow, and we actually lose on the first attempt. We got it all the way down to 1 HP remaining, but 2 confusions here is not enough. We actually have to land 3 hits in order to beat this guy. You might have noticed I saved twice before this battle as I was talking. Well, that's the reason why, because I know that this fight is really, really hard. Still, it should be possible on minimum battles, so I'm gonna just take this a few more times in order to try to get the luck to get through. This time we finally managed to get through. We actually got the range to get the 2-hit KO, but that was not pretty getting through with this Mewtwo. I also had to take a reset here on the God Rod because for some reason, the Berzerk Gene, while it's programmed in permanently, didn't actually show up here. And if I ever see a battle where I don't have the Berzerk Gene on, I'm just gonna have to reset. Now, fortunately, these Pidgeys are much, much weaker, so we can basically do anything as long as we actually manage to land hits here. We do manage to get through on the first legit attempt against Rod. Still, that's not looking pretty, so we're gonna have to run out, heal up, and then go back to fight against Falkner, and he might turn out to be tougher than he ever was in the minimum battles series with this Pokemon. We're just gonna have to see. So Falkner attempt number 1, I'm not sure, but I think I'm gonna try Rage just because he's got 2 Pokemon I expect to be hit a bunch of times. So hopefully building up the Rage is a way to end up dealing significantly more damage to these Pokemon. We level up to level 8 as the Pidgeotto comes out, and Rage almost one-shots it, but then we knock ourselves out in confusion. Now, unfortunately, hitting yourself in confusion does not boost Rage. If it did, we would at least become super powerful here, but instead we're just stuck in this situation where we keep hitting ourselves on the turn that we would knock out the Pidgeotto. So here, finally, after 5 attempts, we managed to knock out the Pidgeotto, but man, that was rough. We're already up to 8 resets with Mewtwo just through the first gym. Remember, this Pokemon on minimum battles in the original minimum battles series, I mean, once you throw on berries and things, it gets through all these fights with 0 resets. These are absolute cakewalks, and yet the Berzerk Gene is completely messing up our Pokemon. So we have to hope that eventually we get stronger physical moves that allow us to basically override the bad effects of our held item. Otherwise, this could turn out to be a nightmare run. So to that end, I'm actually going to get my first upgraded physical move here in this section. We can learn Swift. And fortunately, Swift is a 60 base power physical move, putting it much closer to the power of our confusion. And once we factor in the doubled attack stat, it might actually be a legit strat for getting through things. I'm also going to learn Mud Slap because I think that's going to be an important move later on. And since we're basically going to be a physical attacker for most of this run, I think this is the strategy that I'm going to go with for at least a little while. So with that, we will simply follow Kurt down into the well, and it's time to take on our first Team Rocket members. Let's see if at least we can get a little get back at these trainers here in this section of the game. Instead, we actually lost the first attempt against the first Rocket, but it does look like Swift, if it hits, is enough to knock these Rattatas out in 1 hit, but we take another reset just because of our confusion completely messing us up. Still, when we know that these are 1-hit KOs, I don't see any reason why we would go and take optional battles here. We just have to actually hit our moves. Once we do, it's an easy victory. So yeah, that's kind of the randomness of this one. There's going to be obvious wins that we're just going to have to take resets on because of the fact that our held item kind of messes up our whole strategy. So here we do make it to Jamesy Proton at the end of the Slowpoke well, but this has not been pretty. We're up to 13 resets now, and this is a run where you basically have to save between every single battle because you always have a chance to lose. And when you're losing to Rockets, even though you have a super effective move in Confusion that just one-shots their Pokemon, that tells you just how bad this held item actually makes the game. Now here, Barrier actually could be a legit strat for this Pokemon on the basis that it allows us to boost our defense stat, effectively nullifying some of that damage that we would take from hitting ourselves in Confusion. So I am going to learn Barrier here. Because Rage takes so many turns to set up, I'm just not going to use this move anymore. I've given up on our Rage-filled Mewtwo. No, we're just going to run the Barrier now and try to take things down the way that it took down Ash in the anime by basically making it so that, you know, you can't punch me. I've got an actual barrier in front of you. But with that, let's get into Bugsy's gym because I think this is going to be our best shot of progressing here. Let's see how it goes. And now, while I know that Fury Cutter can build up, I'm going to take on Bugsy first here just to gain a little extra XP because who knows how we're actually going to do against the rival. This may be a mistake, but I'm really just kind of interested to see how this fight actually goes. So now that we're coming into this fight, of course, we know the Metapod can't really do anything against us, and I think the best strategy from here on out is actually to set up Barrier first. Not only does it reduce the damage we take from our opponent's attacks here since they're using physical attacks against us, but it also reduces the amount of damage we do to ourselves after hitting ourselves in Confusion. So we're actually going to be much more survivable here, and now we can use 2 Confusions to knock that first Metapod out. Scyther comes out second. I'm going to switch into the Swift here, hoping that we can actually hit. Instead, we're hitting ourselves in Confusion and we go down. And a couple attempts later, we actually managed to at least land a Swift here on this Scyther, and we can see that we only did 16 damage here, meaning this is a 4-hit KO. So it's pretty clear that even with better luck, we're just not going to get through this fight considering the Confusion. So I'm going to step out and instead take on rival number 2. Let's see if we have any better luck against his team. So rival 2 attempt number 1. Again, I still think that we have to go for Barrier first here, having far less to do with what our opponent is doing and far more to do with the fact that we don't want to do as much damage as if we can when we hit ourselves in Confusion. Still, we're doing massive damage and we lose on the first attempt. So really, any fight where we don't manage to set up Barrier turn 1 is probably already a reset, just because we do so much damage when we hit ourselves in Confusion. Still, 1 Confusion is enough to knock out the Ghastly. Zubat, we can go for Confusion and one-shot that Pokemon as well. So that brings out the Croconaw, where I think technically we're doing more damage with Swift, but let's just see how this actually goes. Once we manage to hit, we get a crit and did 40 damage. So normally this would be a 3-hit KO, but we knock it out the next turn. So we do manage to beat rival number 2 and we gained a level there. I'm not sure that 1 level is enough for Bugsy though. We're just gonna have to try him a couple more times, but assuming that we fail, we're gonna have to take optional battles after that. So Bugsy round 2. Let's see if we can get some slightly better luck here. This time we get a crit to one-shot the Metapod. Scyther is out, and I think our only real strategy is to go Confusion and kind of hope that he gets confused from it. Instead, he just hits the Fury Cutters and we lose. So this is definitely going to be inconsistent, but I am going to just give it a couple of good attempts before I give up, but this one may turn out to just simply be impossible. Now, it is worth looking at what happens if I just go all in on attack. I easily took down the Metapod, of course. The issue is just the amount of damage we take from the Scyther and not having any way to get through that one efficiently. Here we get 2 misses in a row from Fury Cutter, but then we just knock ourselves out in Confusion while the Scyther was sitting with 1 HP remaining. And if, of course, we could get to Kakuna, I think that Confusion, if it hits, would be a 1-hit KO. So we just need slightly better luck than that. This time we get the crit to knock out the Scyther, so we have made it to Kakuna. We just need to hit Confusion, and finally 10 attempts there to get through Bugsy. And keep in mind, we took several before with the level up. That was not pretty. But the question is, should we have taken other battles? I'm honestly not sure, because it's not like we weren't dealing enough damage to get through the fight. It's that we just have the inconsistency from confusion, and that would still be the case when we go to fight even weaker trainers than Bugsy. We've seen that they're hit and miss. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, and there's not really anything that we can do to control it. And this is why the Berzerk Gene might actually be the worst held item in the entire game, because it basically is just giving a chance that your Pokemon loses any given fight because of its effect. You're basically putting like swagger on your own Pokemon at the start of battle and hoping that it works out. So now in this one, I'm going to make a point of buying some elemental punches because I really do think we're going to need them. I definitely think that Fire Punch is going to be important somewhere in this one. In the relatively near future, Thunder Punch could also be very useful, and we may just need those moves over some of our other attacking moves to have any chance of getting through some tough fights. Headbutt obviously has already been picked up, so it could also be a strategy that we use here, but I don't expect the Whitney fight to be very consistent given our Pokemon's held item. This could turn out to be another small nightmare, even though in normal circumstances this is a completely easy battle. We even had our first loss to Scary Carry here that I think I've ever had, so yeah, this could be actually rough coming into the Whitney fight, but I'm gonna try it at my current level just to see how it goes. So first up, against the Clefairy, it has lower defense than special defense. I do think I want to set up barrier though, because we're going to be facing a bunch of physical attacks outside of some metronome shenanigans. And we can see that this Pokemon is going to be a 2-hit KO with our Swift. We lose the first attempt, but if we can manage to get slightly better luck, we may be able to get through at least to see the Miltank. This time we at least get through the Clefairy and level up to level 16, but we've only got 12 HP as we go to Miltank, and it looks like Swift did 20 damage here, meaning that is a 4-hit KO, and it's not like Confusion did that much more there. So yeah, this one could be really, really rough. This time we get about the best luck we could hope for, going to the Miltank on green health, and it's just time to see if we can find a way through this one. I'm gonna Mud Slap first to hopefully break up some rollouts here, and then we'll switch into Swift, hoping that we can get the KO range. Instead, she milk drinks after we hit ourselves in Confusion and then gets a critical hit Stomp to end us. But now, after a ton of attempts there and failing, I'm actually going to go into the underground here and take on this super nerd Teru. I was having trouble beating him before this because he has 4 Pokemon and we're just confused for so many turns that we have such high chances of knocking ourselves out. But I think at this point we may be able to get through, and assuming we do, we'll be able to go into Whitney at least with one more level. We do finally manage to get through him, though it took tons of attempts right there as well. And at this point, I'm realizing that basically everything other than boss battles, I've got to play with more speed up on, otherwise this is going to just take a small eternity. And it's all just going to be luck based the entire time. There's no way to make a fight consistent with this setup, which I think kind of explains why they never brought the Berzerk Gene back in later generations. They clearly decided, like, this isn't really anything that anybody would want. It's so bad. It's like having a traded Pokemon, but not getting the XP boost for it, and having a higher attack stat, but that mostly just causes you to knock yourself out in Confusion. Still, with the extra level, I'm going to come back and try Whitney a few times just to see, but honestly, we might have just hit the wall here where we actually have to train. This time we are at least doing decent damage to the Miltank, and it gets confused and hits itself in Confusion twice, allowing us to win. That was rough though. That was really, really close. We do manage to get through Whitney in a couple more attempts though, at exactly 60 resets now in this run. So we are progressing on minimum battles. I don't feel great about it, and honestly, Mewtwo just feels like the worst Pokemon in the game at this point. Now, I do think at least by the time that we get to level 88 in this one and learn Recover, we'll at least have a decent chance of getting through the whole game, but that's an awful lot to ask for a Mewtwo in the slow level up group to have to grind up to level 88 in order to get a healing move. Still, we're now in Ecruteak, so I'm going to take this opportunity to beat up on the Kimono girls and then hopefully be able to get through rival number 3. We're going to have to see how that one goes. And of course, on the last Kimono girl with the Umbreon, we just need to land 2 Swifts here to win, but it's taken me a ton of attempts to actually get it to go because with Pursuit and hitting ourselves in confusion, it just kept taking us down super quick. So Zuki is kind of OP against our Mewtwo here, proving that we have a lot to feel a bit nervous about as we go through this one. So I'm going to come into the rival number 3 fight, but I think I need to change up my moveset because I actually need moves that can get me through these Pokemon. So while our attack stat is being boosted, I think I'm going to replace Swift with Thunder Punch and put Fire Punch on in the place of Mud Slap. I think this is the best strategy that I can come up with here, but because we're confused, we really need one-hit KO ranges on opponents, if at all possible, because the only way you could make these fights more consistent, since you can't get rid of the confusion, is just to get your opponents in a range where you can actually just knock them out in a single hit and reduce the number of turns the battle takes. So let's try Rival 3 here and see how this goes. Of course, against the first Haunter, there's nothing to do other than confusion. It does get the one-hit KO, so we get through and get to level 20. Croconaws out next. I'm going to go for the Thunder Punch here. It knows Bite, which is super effective, so after hitting myself twice in confusion, I simply go down. And of course, with Curse on in this sort of battle, we're basically dead every time. This time we're back to the Croconaw though, and we can see that we did not get a one-hit KO. We did 61 damage here, so it's going to take at least 2 hits to knock that Pokemon out. Now the Magnemite comes out, we can switch to Fire Punch, which will get the one-hitter, and on Zubat back to Thunder Punch, which gets the job done. So we do manage to beat rival number 3 within a couple of attempts. It's definitely not perfectly consistent by any means, but reasonable enough given that only one Pokemon requires 2 hits to knock out. And now we have Stab Confusion, which should be good for Morty, but let's see if we can actually get through. The bigger problem is, like, the first trainer in this gym has, I believe, 5 or 6 Pokemon that we have to knock out in succession, and that's the bigger issue for this Pokemon, is not really wanting to fight these long battles. But let's see how it goes. And it's just insane to me to watch a level 20 Mewtwo struggle to beat level 16 Ghastlies when they're guaranteed one-hit KOs if we actually hit our move. There would be no reason to go take an optional battle before this because it's not going to do anything for you. You're still just going to be dealing with the same percentages to hit yourself in confusion, unless you gain like a ton of levels to get more HP. But even then, your attack and defense stat are just going up right together with it. So there's not anything to be gained here. So after 5 attempts, we finally beat the first Sage here with his Ghastlies, and we can move on in this. But man, this is not looking good. Still, we do manage to make our way to Morty here with 73 resets so far. For reference, I think we beat the game with Chansey with just over 100 resets with the Lucky Punch, and that was with me using some pretty luck-based strats in a lot of spots there. So yeah, Mewtwo has basically been reduced from the best Pokemon in the game to the worst, but I think it has a chance here against Morty as long as we don't get put to sleep and we hit our moves. So Morty attempt number 1, I'm going straight for the confusion on the Ghastly. We get the one-hit KO, very nice, as we get to level 23. Out comes the first Haunter, and we one-shot that Pokemon as well with confusion. That brings out the Gengar, which is not a one-hitter, it's a 2-hitter, but we hit both confusions there, so we don't get put to sleep. We've made it to the final Haunter, and we one-shot. So when we actually hit all of our moves, we perform just like a standard Mewtwo, completely crushing this section. And now I think we're going to deviate from my standard routing a little bit. I'm going to go down to Cyanwood and try to take on Chuck's gym, with the idea being that we are a psychic type, will resist fighting type moves, we've got a super effective same type move in confusion, and honestly, we may just need to take these fights in whatever order we can that seems most consistent, and having only 2 Pokemon in front of us with the gym leader I think is going to be easier than going to the other gyms because of the constant confusion. I also expect Jasmine not to be too hard in this one since we've already got Fire Punch on the moveset, and really good special attack. I think we're going to get through her Pokemon just fine once we actually use that move. It's just going to be a question of not getting turns where we hit ourselves in confusion. I would expect that in normal circumstances, a Mewtwo just completely crushes this entire part of the game, but we can't take anything for granted here. And it turns out I missed one of the Kimono girls, so I have to come back and fight her. Obviously, it shouldn't be a very hard fight, provided that I actually hit, and sure enough, we get through, but it's pretty close to get through Mickey there. But with that done, we now have all of these Kimono girls actually done, and we can come and pick up the Surf HM. And with the lighthouse done, we're ready to go to Cyanwood and try our hand at Chucky Boy. Of course, first we have to get through the Black Belt Bros, and since the Hitmons have higher special defense in Gen 2, this might not be as easy as you would normally expect it to be, but let's find out. So first up, we've got to take on Yoshi with his Hitmonlee, and the only play here is to go Confusion, I think, and just hope that they don't do too much damage to us. It's going to be a 2-hit KO here with the Confusion, and we lose on the first attempt. Next attempt, we managed to hit Confusion turn 1, so we're at least going to have better odds of getting through here. And sure enough, we do manage to knock out the Hitmonlee, but we're all the way down to 6 HP as the Hitmonchan comes, and I don't think we're going to one-shot this Pokemon. Sure enough, we don't, and we lose to the first Ice Punch. Still, this is just a situation where we need to land 4 hits, hopefully without hitting ourselves in confusion too many times, and then we should be able to get through. This time we had no turns of hitting ourselves in confusion against Yoshi, so we can go into the second fight here against Hitmonchan on Green Health, and we're just hoping to land 2 hits here in order to have a shot of actually winning, but no, we knock ourselves out again. Here we finally managed to knock them out, but that was rough yet again. We're up to 82 resets now in this one. We're gonna have to see how we do getting to Chuck himself. We might have more resets before that. We're just gonna have to see. And sure enough, all the other Pokemon before Chuck are just 1-hit KOs with Confusion. It's just a matter of whether or not we can actually land the move. And it proves again that there's really no reason to go take any optional battles before this. You're not getting more consistent than a 1-hit KO on an opponent with a 100% accurate move. So you just have to reset to not hit yourself 2 or 3 times in confusion, which is the main reason we keep losing here. So we have made it to Chucky Boy though. I expect the Primeape to just be a 1-hit KO, might be a 2-hitter on the Poliwrath, but let's get into this and see how it actually works. So first up on the Poliwrath, as we become Berserk, we're just going to try to use Confusion and fail and get hit by Rage. The next turn we do manage to hit though, and it's just barely not a 1-hit KO here. We knock it out on the next turn. Now on the Poliwrath, technically Thunder Punch is the strongest move, but Surf does massive damage after we hit ourselves in confusion, and when we do hit the Thunder Punch, it only does about half here, so we're going to need 2 hits to knock out that Poliwrath as well. So now on the Poliwrath on full health, it misses a Hypnosis, and we just need 1 more hit here in order to win, and we do. So it takes 6 attempts to get through Chuck, but we have gotten an additional gym badge, and now we've got Dynamic Punch, which could be good for a Dark type later on in the run. We'll just have to see, but for now we can move on, get access to fly, and move around the world a little more efficiently. But now with Chuck done, I'm going to come up and deliver the secret potion and just try Jasmine one time, because who knows, maybe if she's taking the good stuff, we're going to be able to get through her nice and easy here. We have Fire Punch. I think it's going to just one-shot both of the Magnemites. So it really just comes down to the luck on that Steelix. Steelix, of course, with Iron Tail is not guaranteed to hit either, so we should at least have a chance here. Not saying it's a good chance, but at least it's something. Otherwise, of course, we can go to the Rocket Hideout, but I'm going to try to avoid that if I can. So let's just test it out. Jasmine attempt number 1. And apparently I came in without healing, but let's just see the ranges if we can. Of course, Fire Punch one-shots against the first Magnemite, and then we knock ourselves out on the second. So let me take a quick heal first, and then we'll come back and try her properly. As usual, it is about a 1 in 4 chance that we just hit the first 2 turns and knock out the 2 Magnemites, and then we can at least see how the Steelix range is looking. I think any run where we get a Thunder Wave is just an auto auto reset here, so we can also take some pretty quick resets once we see that come in. Here we do manage to knock out the second Magnemite though, so we get our first attempt at Steelix, and Iron Tail did really good damage, but then our Fire Punch does well over half and burns it. So it's not going to knock us out the next turn as she Hyper Potions. We Fire Punch again, and if we can land one more hit, we would win, but we hit ourselves in confusion, so we lose. So this is clearly possible. A critical hit on that Steelix will guarantee the victory, and we're gonna get a couple attempts at it as long as we actually manage to hit the first Fire Punch there. This time we've got it on low health again, and it's burned, so we just needed one more hit, and again we just could not get the chance to hit it. This time she screeches instead of Iron Tail, and then we just managed to get 2 more hits and knock her out on full health. So clearly, if you don't hit yourself in confusion, this is a super easy fight with a Mewtwo with Fire Punch. It's just the confusion that makes that one random, but at least now we get the mineral badge and we've got a boost to our defense that will help us be slightly more survivable and maybe just maybe make this one a little more consistent. But we're at 98 resets right now, so almost to 100 as we go through this one. So I'm just going to pick up more TMs. I'm going to get TM 27 for return because that could help us get a range later on in the run. I'm also going to get access to Ice Punch here because I think that's going to be a move that we're going to want to use when we get towards Clair later on. Headbutt strats I also still expect to come in somewhere in this run just because we're going to need some neutral damage at some point, and at least we can use our physical attack stat. For now though, I'm going to make my way over to the Rocket Hideout because I think this is just the easiest way for us to route. We can gain a couple extra levels there, I think, and then it's going to be time for Price, where I don't think we need any moveset changes. Our current moveset should just crush his team, assuming that we actually land the hits. I'll also make sure to pick up Hidden Power here, which will be Hidden Power Dark since this is a Max DV's Pokemon, mostly for the fact that it's going to create at least a chance that we can get through somebody like Will more effectively later on. Honestly, I expect to have multiple copies of the Goldenrod TMs when we actually go to the league because we're probably going to be mixing and matching out our elemental punches throughout that entire section if we're actually going to get through it reasonably. And here in the Rocket Hideout, just this first set of back-to-back battles as we come in is actually a massive wall because they have 5 Pokemon between them, and while we basically one-shot these Pokemon, we have to get through without hitting ourselves a tons of times in confusion, otherwise we simply lose. Again, these Pokemon are all basically one-hit KOs, so it's just a matter of not being confused for too many turns, but that's an awful lot to ask when you have to take out 5 Pokemon. We do finally get it and get to level 29 though, so we can progress in this run, but it's just the little things like that that are really sticking out to me as we go through with this Berzerk Gene Mewtwo, that the larger the opponent's team gets, the more inconsistent it is to actually progress in the game. And it turns out that this basement executive, for whatever reason, I just can't get the luck to get through him. Of course, it's a one-hit KO here on the Zubat with confusion whenever we actually do hit it. Raticate is a 2-hit KO at this point, but still, we should be able to get through it a reasonable percentage of the time. And then Coughing is a 1-hitter, but I just keep hitting myself so many times in confusion here that I keep losing this fight. Here we finally managed to get through with 3 HP remaining at level 30. So in spite of our super effective moves against 2 of the Pokemon and the Raticate basically just being an easy 2-hit KO, that fight's completely inconsistent. Probably gaining a couple levels there so that the Raticate is at least a guaranteed 1-hit KO is the way to go. But even then, it's not making that fight that much better. Now, of course, in general, we should be expecting to hit ourselves in confusion about once per every Pokemon on the opponent's team. So if they have 1 Pokemon, on average, we would hit ourselves 1 time. If they have 6 Pokemon, we would expect on average to hit ourselves 6 times, which basically anything more than 3 times, we're just knocking ourselves out. And that's the real issue that we're running into here. And it often feels like, even though I'm in a situation where like 3 enemy Pokemon, you know, taking 4 turns to knock out, I actually end up hitting myself more times than I actually hit them it feels like, in most of these fights. Still, we have made it to the final executive, so let's see how it goes. She leads off with the Arbok. We can go Confusion there and one-shot that Pokemon. Murkrow comes out next. We've got the Thunder Punch if we can actually hit. We do finally manage to land the hit and one-hit KO that Pokemon. Gloom is out last, and we just need to land Confusion. Instead, we hit ourselves, and it absorbs us down. It takes several attempts to get back to the Gloom in this one, and we hit ourselves twice in Confusion, even though it never damaged us, just to knock ourselves out. Back to Gloom on the next attempt. We finally actually just managed to land everything and get through on full health, because all the Pokemon were simply one-hit KOs once we actually don't hit ourselves in Confusion. And now we have completed the Rocket Hideout. We can take on Price after this, and he's gonna probably be just as random as these other trainers given his 3 Pokemon. So we're coming in with a game time of 4 hours and 20 minutes, so maybe this will be okay. Let's just get into the fight and find out. Price, of course, leads off with his Seal, and the only play here is to go for the Thunder Punch. It does manage the one-hit KO on that Pokemon. We get to level 31 as Dugong comes out. I'm also Thunder Punching here because it's super effective, but we hit ourselves twice and get 2 Aurora Beams, one which was a crit, and knock ourselves out in Confusion. Next attempt, we do knock out the Seal after hitting ourselves once in Confusion. We land the Thunder Punch on Dugong, and it's a 2-hitter, but we managed to take it out the next turn. Piloswine's out last. We can go for the Fire Punch here, but we miss and get hit by Blizzard. Still, we just barely survive, only to knock ourselves out again. Back to the Piloswine on the next attempt, though. We once again just can't land any hits and get knocked out. Third time might be the charm as we finally hit a Fire Punch, taking him down to very low health. He Hyper Potions, we Fire Punch again. We still don't quite get the range, and we hit ourselves in Confusion and get knocked out by a Fury Attack. Still with him on only 3 HP remaining, this might actually just be a damage range, so I think it's worth another attempt. This time we critical hit the Piloswine though, allowing us to finally beat Price after 11 attempts, and we have gotten 7 gym badges. Not in a pretty fashion by any means, but hey, we're here, we're ready to move on to Goldenrod and the whole Rocket Radio Tower storyline. This is going to be super inconsistent as well, but I expect to basically one-shot everything here, so let's just see if we can finally manage to get the luck to get through all these fights. This is going to definitely not be pretty though. And as we make our way to the top of the radio tower, we have a really tough fight just because this guy has 6 Pokemon, like 5 Coughings and a Wheezing. We should one-shot all of them as long as we land Confusion. It's just a question of whether or not we can actually land the Confusions before we knock ourselves out, and that Smokescreen definitely is not helping us. So we're probably losing on this first attempt. But sure enough, when he does send out the Wheezing, it is a one-hit KO, so everything here will get one-shot. It's just about the luck to not hit ourselves in Confusion. So a really long fight like this does kind of make sense to set up Barrier, since it's gonna take a lot of turns to knock these Pokemon out anyway, and they're using physical moves against us. And at least this gives us more chances to hit their Pokemon before we get knocked out. We do take a couple of Smokescreens here, but you know, Smokescreen plus Poison might still spell the end of us. So it takes a bit of doing, but we do finally manage to win that fight, and we can now move on to the basement and rival number 4. Now I think we have enough moves for rival number 4, but we're just gonna have to see how this fight actually goes. Of course, he's going to lead off with his Golbat. There's nothing better than Confusion here as a same type move, but when we miss, we get Bite, which does massive damage. Still, we do one-shot there at least. Out comes Sneasel next. We're gonna go for the Fire Punch if we can actually manage to hit it. Feint Attack does decent damage though, and we hit ourselves in Confusion, so we lose. Next attempt, we're back to Sneasel, and I'm just interested to see if this is a one-hit KO or not, but we just don't even get the chance to test it out. Here, when we do hit, we do in fact one-shot. Feraligatr comes out next, and we hit ourselves in Confusion, and Bite takes us down. I'm interested yet again to see what the range there is with the Thunder Punch. We're just gonna have to see it once we actually hit it. So here we do manage to land Thunder Punch on Feraligatr, alligator and one-shot that Pokemon. Magnemite comes out where we need to land a Fire Punch, but we knock ourselves out in confusion instead. So I'm pretty sure at this point that all of these Pokemon are one-hit KOs, provided that we actually hit, and it's just the issue that we're likely to hit ourselves in confusion just as often as we hit our opponents. Back to Magnemite, this time on green health, but we hit ourselves and it lands a Thunder Wave on us. Still, we did manage to knock it out. That brings out the final Haunter. We just need to actually hit confusion. Shadow Ball did not knock us out, and we take the rival down. So definitely not pretty. We're up to 160 resets in this run now, but the vast majority of the time, the fights are actually incredibly simple as long as we don't hit ourselves in confusion. So I just don't see any way to make this run more consistent than what we've had to this point. It seems to me that all of the luck in this run is just because of the confusion, and there's no way to get around that. So, you know, if you're one of those people who likes to beat the game with like few resets or no resets, this definitely is not the run for you. So after quite a bit of grinding, we've managed to get through the rest of the trainers here in the underground so we can get the card key. And now it's time to make our way back up to try to take on the final Rocket executives. And I think we're going to need a new move in order to get through, just because we're going to be dealing with a Houndour and Houndoom up there. So I'm going to go ahead and slap on the move Headbutt here, which for now I'm going to put on over Fire Punch. And let's just see how this goes as we get up there. Of course, our boosted attack stat should at least help us against that Houndoom. And since our other moves aren't really that great against it, I think this is the best play. I'm going to save return for later on because we may need that move in a really clutch spot. For now, Headbutt is basically enough to just one-shot opponents. Still, we have to take a lot of trips out to heal up just because of the fact that we're kind of struggling to get through fights without taking damage. And while I could buy a whole bunch of potions or something in order to heal up, I want to save my money as much as possible for buying TMs because I think that's going to be super important as we go through the run. So now as we come to the final Rocket executive, he's only got 3 Pokemon. We should have good enough moves to get through this, but let's see how much luck it actually takes. We're going to go Headbutt first on the Houndour. That's an easy one-hit KO. Houndoom comes out next. I'm going to stick with Headbutt here as it goes Feint Attack after I hit myself, and it just simply knocks me out in 2 hits after I hit myself twice in a row. Let's try this one again though. Headbutt again on the Houndour is a one-hitter. Back to Houndoom, we hit the Headbutt this time and one-shot that Pokemon. That brings out the Coughing. We just need to land a Confusion here. We hit ourselves, we get hit by Sludge, but then we finally hit it. So it took 2 attempts to get through that final executive. That was actually pretty good overall, given the fact that we could really only hit ourselves like once in Confusion there if we were going to win. But we have successfully now cleared out the entire Rocket area. And we won't have to look at any more Team Rocket members until we get to Kanto and have to get that machine part, by which point, I mean, we won't really be worried about Team Rocket anymore anyway. But for now, we're going to progress in this challenge, and I'm going to take this opportunity to learn Ice Punch on my Berserker Mew, and I'm going to learn that over Headbutt for now because honestly, I think this is just the best strategy as we go into Clair. Because while flinches are nice, honestly, I think this whole fight is going to come down to just one-shotting against the Dragonairs and then hoping to survive enough turns to knock out the Kingdra. And it's not going to be pretty no matter how we do it. We're going to need a lot of luck here to get through this one. And now people who are fans of my Gen 1 channel will know I'm not a big fan of Rest. I consider it to be a bit of a broken TM because basically everything can learn it, and I feel like it gives a really big advantage to a lot of Pokemon. But this is a situation where Rest might actually be incredibly useful because it gives us that opportunity to heal in battle. If we could manage to set up Barrier and then Rest in order to recover HP, we might have situations where we can actually survive more turns against some key opponents and have a chance at least to progress in this challenge. I'm not sure if it will ever actually work out though, so I'm just going to throw it in the bag for now, but I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind as a strategy if everything else is failing. For now though, we have made it to Clair's gym. I'm going to try to beat up on the randos, assuming we can actually hit, and then let's get to the gym leader herself. So fortunately, we get through all the randos without too much difficulty. We're going to have to run out and heal real quick before we can take on Clair herself. But with that, it is now Clair time. Let's see if we can complete all the Johto gyms on minimum battles. And probably this just is a bunch of one-hit KOs on the Dragonairs as long as we actually hit. And then we'll just have to see the range on Kingdra, but it's probably nowhere close to being a two-hitter. If I have to guess, it's probably going to be pretty random. First up, though, we've got the Dragonairs. We've got to land some Ice Punches here, and we're going to get Thunder Waved basically no matter what we do, unless we can manage to land 3 Ice Punches in a row. And on this low health, I don't think we have any shot of getting through this one. We do manage to knock out all 3 Dragonairs on this one, but we're on low health going to Kingdra, so I think just a simple Surf ends us. Sure enough, it does, and we're just gonna have to hope to get through on a run with no paralysis. So essentially a 1 in 8 chance of hitting the 3 Dragonairs in a row with no misses, or with no turns of hitting ourselves in confusion. I think that's the only way we actually have a shot here. So this time we do manage to get through with no paralysis, still on green health. We hit ourselves once in confusion, but the Thunder Wave missed. That's a 25% chance for Thunder Wave to miss there. And now we at least get to see what kind of range we get against the Kingdra. A critical hit from Thunder Punch did over half. She Hyper Potions. We hit again, but this is normally a 3-hit KO on this Pokemon, and we get knocked out by the Surf. So this time we get to the Kingdra on full health, only to hit ourselves turn 1 and then get hit by a smoke screen. We hit ourselves a second time, get a critical hit Surf, and that's basically the end of this one. And honestly, at this point, it might be worth just going for return and trying to use a strong physical move against that Kingdra. So I'm going to forget Thunder Punch to learn return here, and let's just see if that gives us a better range on that last Pokemon. So we are back to Kingdra this time after hitting ourselves once, yet again getting a miss from the Thunder Wave. We go return, and it does about 3/4 here. She Hyper Potions, we hit ourselves in confusion, but we hit return the next turn, and now we just need any hit here, and we get it. So we do manage to finally knock out Clair after 39 resets. Most of those were just resets because we got paralyzed, and at that point the run is basically over. But the fact is that you need to change to a good physical move here if you're going to take Clair down. And honestly, from this point on, return's probably just going to be stuck on our moveset as one of our primary moves at least. We'll also be adding in other elemental punches throughout this section. Basically, I think after we get through Koga and Bruno, we can just get rid of confusion. We'll be able to get Psychic when we get over to Kanto anyway. And I think that's just going to be our ideal strategy. Like when we get to Karen and Lance, I mean, maybe confusion for the Gengar, but outside of that, it's just not really doing that much for us. And here in the Dragon's Den, clearly these sages don't care at all that we're just running an absolutely mad Pokemon through the entire game. They're just like, yeah, this is perfectly fine. You know, they're just going to tell Clair, give this guy his badge. He's clearly better than you, in spite of the fact that it took us nearly 40 attempts to beat her. Still, it's nice that we get a little something for the sheer hours put in trying to get through here. And we are on to rival number 5 in the league. These fights are just going to be inconsistent no matter what we do. We could have perfect strategies here. Their teams are just going to be like 5-6 Pokemon each. So we're just going to be in this situation where it's basically impossible to be perfectly consistent, given that on average, the number of times that we'll hit ourselves in confusion means that we'll simply knock ourselves out. So here as we come into the rival 5 fight, I'm not going to change my moveset for now. Let's get into this and see if we can manage the win. So first up, of course, we've got the Sneasel. I'm just going to try to go return right here. Of course, we hit ourselves in confusion and he starts setting up Fury Cutter, but then we one-shot that Pokemon. Golbat comes out next. We can really use any of our moves here. They're all basically going to be strong, but we're just hitting ourselves in confusion and we lose that attempt. Still, I expect that Golbat to be a one-hit KO, so I don't think there's any advantage to doing anything other than just resetting here and trying again. Ice Punch this time does get the one-hitter. Magneton comes out. This is the Pokemon I don't have anything good for at the moment, so we might need to change Ice Punch to Fire Punch. Still, Return is going to be a 2-hit KO on this Pokemon from the looks of things, but we knock ourselves out in confusion. So let's make a small change to our moveset. I went ahead and just bought a bunch of Goldenrod TMs so that I would have them, and I'm just going to throw Fire Punch on top of Ice Punch because I think that's going to be enough to get us through this. I think everything else we can basically go Return or we can go for Confusion. So this time we one-shot the Sneasel nice and easy. We can instead go for Confusion on the Golbat. It's the same power as that Ice Punch we were using before. Now on the Magneton, we get paralyzed, but if we can land a Fire Punch, this should just be a one-hitter. And sure enough, it is. We're still probably losing this attempt just due to the fact that we're paralyzed, and we get Shadow Balled down by the Haunter. Next attempt, we're back to Magnemite again on full health, and of course it has to hit the Thunder Wave. I think we just need a run where we don't get Thunder Waved, though we do knock it out still on green health, so we should at least have a chance here. But paralysis plus not being able to move is pretty bad, and we get cursed. So that's basically the end of that one. This time we do manage to one-shot that Magneton with no status, only to hit ourselves in confusion against the Haunter and get cursed, so we lose. I'm pretty sure that Haunter still is a one-hit KO though, so as long as we can actually get a run where we actually hit it, I think we win. And again, as long as it is a one-hit KO, there's not really any logic to going and grinding any additional levels because they're not going to really help us at all. Back to the Haunter on full health this time. We do hit the confusion and get the one-shot. That brings out Kadabra, where obviously Return is the only play. It's going Future Sight over and over again as we just hit ourselves 4 times in a row in confusion. Back again to the Kadabra a couple of attempts later. This time we hit the Return and just get the easy one-hitter. And now I'm just going to stick with Return on the Feraligatr. It goes Slash. But once Return hits, it does really good damage. We just need to land one more hit and we get it. So only the Feraligatr is a 2-hit KO there. Everything else is a one-hitter. And it provided that we just don't hit ourselves in confusion a ton of times, we can get it to go. It's just not pretty. And that brings us to the league where that's probably going to be the story of the entire league if I have to guess. So I'm just going to buy a bunch of full restores because we may need them, and let's get into this. But for the first fight, I'm actually going to change my moveset yet again. Since I know I have all of these elemental punches in the bag, I'm going to learn Shadow Ball here and forget Fire Punch, because Shadow Ball will be super effective against all of Will's team, and it's a physical move, so it will use our higher boosted attack stat. So I think that will make Will just a one-hit KO fest, and all we need to do is actually get to move on those turns. So Will attempt number 1, we're going to go for Shadow Ball on the Xatu. It's a one-hitter as we get to level 43. The second Xatu comes out, we Shadow Ball that Pokemon as well. Jinx comes out, we hit ourselves in confusion and take an Ice Punch, and then hit ourselves again and get double slapped, and then hit ourselves again and get Ice Punched and lose. Still, I think this has nothing to do with anything that his Pokemon are doing, and just everything to do with the hitting ourselves in confusion. So I think this might be a spot to actually set up a bunch of barriers just to reduce the amount of damage we do to ourselves. So here, after setting up 2 barriers, now I'm going to go into my attacks, just because we're taking significantly less damage when we hit ourselves, but it still is pretty likely that we're going to hit ourselves a bunch of times, and even a move like Psychic will build up over time against us when he just is hitting us over and over and over again. Still, we managed to get back to Jinx this time. We hit it with a Shadow Ball, and that's a one-hitter. Out comes Exeggutor. We hit it with Shadow Ball, and it goes down. And Slowbro, we hit ourselves in confusion. It goes Amnesia, and then it goes Curse. And we just keep hitting ourselves and hitting ourselves again, and he knocks us out. We get back to the Slowbro with only 5 HP remaining a few attempts later, but we hit the Shadow Ball, so this time we actually win. We get to level 44, and we have defeated Willy Boy. Now, I decided not to learn Future Sight here because I don't actually think it's going to help us that much. Instead, I'm going to move on now to Koga. I think that basically Shadow Ball isn't useful to us anymore at this point though, so I'm going to replace that move. I think Fire Punch is important for the Fortress here. I think Return and Confusion can handle everything else, but let's just see if that's correct. So Koga attempt number 1, I'm just going to go Confusion on the Ariados, which is an easy one-hitter. Out comes the Fortress. We're going for the Fire Punch here. Instead, we hit ourselves in Confusion twice. He hits Swift on us and sets up spikes. But once we hit the Fire Punch, of course, that's an easy one-hit KO. We can go Confusion on the Muck. It's going to be a 2-hitter here as he goes Minimize, but we still hit even after the evasion boost. Out comes the Crobat and it goes Double Team. We miss the Confusion. Now we finally hit, but it's going to be a 2-hit KO on this Pokemon and he full restores. A quick attack just ends us. Next attempt, we get back to the Crobat, only to simply knock ourselves out. But the next time we do manage to knock out the Crobat, and we have made it to the final Venomoth here, only to hit ourselves in Confusion, and we had Toxic on, so the toxic damage just ended us. Still, I'm pretty sure one more hit there would have simply won the fight, so it's sad that we didn't manage to get it, but I do think this fight is overall going to be possible. Maybe not pretty, but definitely possible here. So I think this might be a spot to even set up a barrier or two to take less damage when we hit ourselves in Confusion, as well as less damage from their primary attacking moves. But we need better luck on that first Ariados to not hit ourselves in Confusion like 5 times. So this time we managed to set up all the barriers on the Ariados, and now we can progress where at least now when we're getting hit by their attacks, we're not taking very much damage, nor are we hurting ourselves as much when we hit ourselves in Confusion. Critical hits, of course, still are an issue, and we just can't seem to hit. We hit ourselves like 5 times in Confusion in a row here, and we simply go down on the Fortress because we never landed in a single attack. This time he sends out the Venomoth third and we knock it out in a single hit. So sure enough, a single Fire Punch is all that's required there. And now we just need to actually knock out this Crobat and Muck. We get Toxic, Return is not quite a one-hitter, and we simply go down after hitting ourselves in Confusion multiple times on that Pokemon. This time we get to the Muck, which is out last though. We go Confusion. Yes, we've got Toxic on. We need to land one more hit and we get it. So it took 33 attempts to beat Koga there. He is possible on minimum battles. It's not pretty, but again, that's a super easy fight with anything less than terrible luck. And now it's time for Bruno. I think we've got everything that we need to get through this fight, but let's see. So first off, on the Hitmons, they technically have higher special defense than defense, but I still think this is a good spot to set up Confusion. It's not quite a one-hitter here. I'm going to try to set a barrier when we get Dig here, but of course in this first attempt we just can't seem to move. Still, we managed to at least knock out Hitmontop in 2 hits. We'll go back to Confusion for Onix, but we simply knock ourselves out in Confusion. It turns out that Return is a one-hit KO there on the Hitmontop, however, and that brings out the Onix again. Confusion on this Pokemon is a one-hitter. Hitmonchan is kind of in the same boat as Hitmontop. I expect Return to one-shot here, given the defense stat of this Pokemon. So we finally hit our Return, and sure enough, that is a one-hit KO. Machamp is out next. This one's kind of questionable, but it does have lower defense, so I'm going to stick with Return here. It's not quite the one-hitter, so we're just going to need to land something else as he max potions, and we knock ourselves out in Confusion. This time he sends out Hitmonlee before Hitmonchan, and we simply knock ourselves out, but I think that would have also been a one-hitter with the Return. Here we once again get Machamp third. I'm going to try the Confusion instead this time. It's still a 2-hit KO, but we do manage to knock that Pokemon out. Hitmonchan comes out, we'll go for Return as it goes Fire Punch, but we simply hit ourselves in Confusion and get knocked out. This time we get the Hitmonlee, and once we land Return, it is a one-hit KO, and we go down to the Machamp after hitting ourselves in Confusion. So Bruno, who should be one of the easiest trainers in the entire game for a Psychic type, is actually turning out to be basically as much of a wall as Koga before, it feels like, because we've just got to land so many hits in order to get through this one. We do manage to knock out Machamp, so we do manage to knock out Hitmonlee. Hitmonchan is the last Pokemon out. If we do land Return, we will win, otherwise we lose because we've only got 7 HP, and it goes Mach Punch to take us down. This time he put the Hitmons out before he put out Machamp, so Machamp is the last Pokemon on the team. I'm going to go Fire Punch here because I think I can get it in a range to knock it out the next turn with Return. Sure enough, I can. Finally, we managed to beat Bruno, but we're all the way up to 283 resets in this run, which is absolutely ridiculous. And don't worry about those optional battles. We have not taken any. I took the Gyarados to go knock out the 4 required trainers inside of the Sprout Tower just so that I could get access to Flash. And there's one other one that pops up on my overlay somewhere that isn't actually supposed to be there back in the middle section of the game. I'll have to double check after this run where that's actually coming in. But still on minimum battles, our Berserk Mew has made it to Karen. Now, Karen could be one of the tougher fights in the entire game for this Pokemon, owing to the fact that we do not have great moves for a lot of her Pokemon. Still, I'm going to try her once with my current moveset because maybe Return can get through things other than the Gengar, and then it's just about confusion on the Gengar. Honestly, not sure, but let's just test it and find out. So first off, of course, she has the Umbreon. Let's see what Return does to this Pokemon. It is not a one-hitter and we get Feint Attack, but we knock it out in 2 hits, so fair enough as we get to level 46. Murkrow comes out next. I'm just going to stick with Return here and get the 1-hit KO. Houndoom is out next. We don't get to move, and then Crunch just completely destroys us with a crit. Still, I'm just kind of interested to see what the range is on that Houndoom, because that's going to determine whether or not I add on something like Dynamic Punch here instead of, for example, Fire Punch, just to see if that will give me a better setup. So we do get back to Houndoom on the next attempt. Crunch still will do massive damage, and we just knock ourselves out after that. Here we do land Return on Houndoom though, and it is a 1-hit KO. That brings out the Gengar where we can go for Confusion, and we get the 1-shot. So we've made it to the final Vileplume. We can go Confusion or Fire Punch. Either should be fine as long as we actually manage to land a hit. She goes Stun Spore, and then Petal Dance. We're fully paralyzed and we lose. But that basically makes me think that this fight is just fine. And once we get through the Umbreon, we could technically just one-shot everything, I think. It's just going to be a matter of resets. Once again, back to Vileplume, and because of Curse and hitting ourselves in Confusion, we lose. Back to Gengar again. We hit the Confusion, so that Pokemon goes down. We're on about half health as we get to the final Vileplume, and we hit the Fire Punch here, getting not quite the 1-hit KO. It goes Moonlight, but then we land Return, so we finally managed to beat Karen. We're 3 hours into this run in real time, and I've been speeding up a lot in between the main battles, but we finally have made it to Lance. This is ridiculous. We clearly should have won a lot of these fights much more easily than we have. It's just been a matter of not having the right moves in a lot of these spots. Now, we do have a situation here where it makes sense to upgrade our moveset. We're going to throw on Ice Punch since it's going to be good against most of the team here. So Fire Punch is now gone. And I'm also going to forget Confusion in order to learn Thunder Punch. That will give us at least one super effective move against every single Pokemon on the team. So then the question just becomes, do we one-shot or not? If we do, I think we're perfectly fine. Ice Punch and Thunder Punch, I think, are enough for the Gyarados and all the Dragonites. So it mostly comes down to the Charizard and the Aerodactyl here. So Lance attempt number 1, we come up against the Gyarados, where I'm going to go Thunder Punch and get the easy KO. That will bring out Dragonite number 1, where we're going Ice Punch. It's an easy one-hitter as well. Dragonite number 2, we hit ourselves in Confusion. It misses a Thunder Wave though. Now it hits, and I think that might be the end of this one because Paralysis plus Confusion is pretty bad, though we do manage to knock that Pokemon out. We've made it to Aerodactyl. We could go Thunder Punch or Ice Punch here. It doesn't really matter, but we're just not going to get through in that situation. So let's try again and hope for some better luck. So this time we managed to get back to the Aerodactyl without any paralysis on, and still on green health. We hit ourselves in Confusion and get hit by Rock Slide, but then Ice Punch is a 1-hit KO on that Pokemon, Charizard is out next. I'm going for the Thunder Punch. I didn't get the chance to see the range because I hit myself in confusion and the Flamethrower ended me. But if that Charizard is a one-hit KO, then this is entirely just a bunch of one-hit KOs and we just have to actually land the hits. I think we can reset anytime we get hit by Thunder Wave in this one, just because it lowers the odds of winning by a significant margin. So really, as long as we land all of the hits on these two Dragonites, we might just have a shot here. We managed to get that luck this time, so we're back to the Aerodactyl on full health. We knock it out still on full health. That brings us back to Charizard. Let's see the range. We hit ourselves in confusion and take a Flamethrower, but now we hit the Thunder Punch. It's a 2-hit KO on this Pokemon. We do manage to get the luck, though. That brings us to the final Dragonite at level 48. We need to land an Ice Punch, otherwise we lose, and we hit ourselves in confusion. Still, on that Charizard, it's worth testing if Return will get a one-hitter there or not. Given that our attack stat is significantly higher than our special attack, it could be a situation where it actually works out that way. So back to Charizard again on green health. Let's try Return, and it does get the one-hit KO, so we're to the final Dragonite on green health. We hit ourselves in confusion, it hits Outrage, but then we hit the Ice Punch, and finally, after over 3 hours and 23 attempts there on Lance, we are able to beat all of Johto on minimum battles. And when you're one-shotting there against every single Pokemon on the champions team, yet again, there's not any reason to take optional battles in this. That's not the problem in this run. That was brutal, to say the least. 328 resets to get through just the Johto section of this run. Still, we have managed to get something done here. We have completed 8 gyms and the Elite Four. Now we've got to see if we can manage to beat Red. Anyway, honestly, if you're still watching at this point after 328 resets, drop your predictions below of how much this is going to take to actually beat Red, because this is going to be brutal, I think. Still, we will get Stab Psychic in the next section. We can obviously learn some tutor moves like Ice Beam or Flamethrower if we need them, but honestly, I think we're pretty much stuck with the kind of strategies we're using so far. But now that we've successfully found our way through Johto, it is time to make our way to Kanto, and this could be very, very interesting. Now, I expect that we beat all of the gym leaders, of course, but they're not necessarily going to be as easy as in most of our runs, purely because of the fact that our Mewtwo is sitting here struggling to even get through kind of rando trainers when they have big teams. And a lot of those gym leaders do have enough Pokemon that I think they're going to give us trouble from hitting ourselves in confusion. Still, I expect that if we actually manage to hit things, we'll basically be one-shotting a lot of Pokemon here. So it's just going to be a matter of getting the luck to actually hit our moves. Of course, it would help if we could even beat this Sailor on the SS Aqua as we make our way over to Kanto, but he just reminds us yet again that even when we're effectively 15, 20 levels higher than the opponent, it really doesn't matter. They still can find ways to beat us because we just hit ourselves in confusion so many times. We finally get that on the 3rd attempt and we're able to move on in the game, but man, that is rough. So I'm going to take a quick heal first, and then I'm going to make my way out into Vermilion City, where we have to decide how to route, and I think we're basically going to be fine against Surge. It's just a matter of when we actually land hits on his 4 Pokemon. As long as we actually hit them all, we shouldn't have any issues here, but that is kind of big ask with this Pokemon. Fortunately, we bought plenty of full restores before this, so we can heal up after losing to the rando in the gym once, and we're ready to take on Lieutenant Surge himself. So Surge, of course, leads off with his Raichu as we become confused. Once we hit any move, I think we're basically good, but it turns out Ice Punch is not enough. We're going to need to use Return in order to knock this Pokemon out, so we just lose on the first attempt. Let's try this again. This time we land Return, and it is a one-hit KO on that Pokemon. Out comes the first Electrode, which also gets completely destroyed. Magneton comes out. I don't think we've got anything better than Return here, and he just loves to use double team. So while return is going to be a 2-hit KO on this Pokemon, it still shouldn't be that bad unless we just keep missing because of the fact that we have one double team from our opponent, causing us to miss 2 returns that otherwise would have knocked that Pokemon out. So honestly, I think we need to just knock out the Raichu before it Thunder Waves, and then we can even set up some barriers on the second Pokemon here, because this Electrode doesn't know any special moves. The barriers here, though, are of course all about not dealing as much damage to ourselves when we hit ourselves in confusion, and at least giving ourselves more turns to try to get this done. Unfortunately, though, we just hit ourselves in confusion basically every time. Still, after getting through those first 2 Pokemon, we are back to this Magneton, where yet again, it's going to be a 2-hitter. There's nothing we can do about that, and we're going to get paralyzed by Zap Cannon. Yet again, nothing we can do there, but we do knock it out this time at least. That brings out the second Electrode. It goes double team. We hit ourselves in confusion. Finally, we do land return and knock it out, though. That brings out the final Pokemon, Electabuzz. We've got 62 HP. It hits the Thunder. We would need to hit this turn, but instead we hit ourselves in confusion and we lose that fight. Now, one thing, of course, that we can do is add on Fire Punch, which will be super effective against that Magneton. So I'm just going to throw it on over Ice Punch for now. Let's just see if we get the 1-hit KOs on everything, assuming that we actually move. Can we get this one to go? So here we get back to the Magneton. Let's just see if this is a 1-hitter with the Fire Punch. Of course, we don't get the chance because we just hit ourselves in confusion. Back again, we hit Fire Punch this time and we do get the 1-hit KO. So we're on to the second Electrode with no paralysis, and we just need to land the hits. We get the 1-hitter there, so we're on about half health as we get to the final Electabuzz. Thunder does a lot of damage and we hit ourselves twice in confusion, but I guarantee that once we actually hit this one with return, we will win this fight. Next attempt, we're in the same situation, 108 HP as we go to Electabuzz, but this time we hit, and just like that, we have defeated Lieutenant Surge. It took like 12 attempts to get that to go, though, just because of the fact that we could not stop hitting ourselves. This run is basically like being a younger brother back in the day, you know, where you're forced to hit yourself over and over again by your older brother. That's basically what it feels like playing with this Berzerk Gene Mewtwo. Granted, that sort of brotherly love, should we call it, is probably a relic of the 90s at this point. I don't think anybody would raise their kids that way these days, but I don't know. Tell me in the comments. But now that we have actually managed to beat Lieutenant Surge, I think it's time to go to Sabrina. She should be really easy as long as we land return. She only has 3 Pokemon here, so in theory, a lot easier than what we were just dealing with Lieutenant Surge. Plus, her Pokemon don't have super effective moves or even like really good moves against a Mewtwo. So let's see how this goes. So first off, we have the Espeon. I'm just going to go return here. We miss. We get Sand Attack. We hit ourselves again. Psychic doesn't do that much, but we're just hitting ourselves every turn. Finally, we land return, and that is a 1-hit KO. Mr. Mime's out next. We missed the return due to the Sand Attack. Otherwise, I think that Pokemon's going down as well. So we're basically guaranteed here that we're going to get Sand Attacked any turn that we don't hit our return the first turn. So we basically need to reset for that level of luck. There, when we do hit it on turn 1, we just knock out the Espeon. Out comes the Mr. Mime as we're still on full health. We hit ourselves in confusion and it uses Barrier. I'm not sure its Barrier really matters though. Now it sets up Reflect though, and that could matter because that's effectively a 4x on its defense, meaning we simply lose. So some really good big brain strats here from Sabrina, proving once again that she is the best Kanto gym leader. But once we land return on Mr. Mime on the first attempt, it is just a 1-hit KO. We've made it to Alakazam, basically the quintessential glass cannon of the Pokemon world, and it goes down in a single hit as we get to level 50. So unlike Lieutenant Surge, that only took like 3 attempts to get through Sabrina there, proving that, at least in this case, Sabrina is worse than Lieutenant Surge. I will now take this opportunity to pick up the Psychic TM here just in order to have it. Not sure if it's going to be super useful at any point, but who knows? We could use it, I guess, for Janine. And it is, you know, a strong same type move, so there could be a spot to actually add it on, but for now I'm going to just keep it in the bag. I don't think we actually need it here for this next gym. So just one reset there on the Executor trainer, which was kind of bad luck. She only has one Pokemon, this trainer right here. So we had basically a 50-50 shot on any turn of just one-shotting that Pokemon and couldn't get it. But outside of that, we get through the randos just fine. It's time to take on Erica herself. So Erica, of course, leads off with her Tangela. The only play here is to go for Fire Punch, I think. Instead, we hit ourselves in confusion and we get in a bind. Now we hit Fire Punch the next turn. It's an easy one-hit KO. Jump Bluff is out next. We once again hit ourselves in confusion and it uses Giga Drain, but we one-shot that Pokemon after that with a Fire Punch. Out comes Blossom and we miss. And we hit ourselves and it takes in Sunlight, but the Fire Punch is not quite a one-hit KO. It actually survives with 6 HP remaining. Still, that might be a one-hitter with return, so I'm going to try this one again just to see. So next attempt, we're back to the Blossom. Let's go for the return here. It goes Sunny Day. That actually makes me want to use Fire Punch because Fire Punch will just be boosted, but we hit ourselves in confusion every single turn, so we simply go down. Once again, Blossom goes Sunny Day on the next attempt, and we get knocked out by a Solar Beam after failing to hit 2 times in a row. Finally, we do manage to land return on Blossom the next attempt, and it is a one-hit KO, allowing us to get to the Victory Bell. And let's just see what kind of range we get here. We hit ourselves once and get Razor Leafed, and then we just get Razor Leafed again after hitting ourselves, so we lose. But this could be another Lieutenant Surge type of situation where we just have to reset until we land all the hits because everything should be a one-hit KO, and the only reason we're losing is because we keep hitting ourselves in confusion. So back to Victory Bell again, and we get the critical hit Razor Leaf that knocks us out. So this again might be a spot where we don't take too much damage from the first Pokemon, and it's better to just set a barrier here. And then after a couple barriers, I will try to set up the Fire Punch. Unfortunately, we get put to sleep, and that's the problem with trying to set up here on the Tangela. And we simply are going down due to chip damage. So it seems like Tangela just has to be a Fire Punch to try to knock it out. And then we actually have to be quite careful on Jump Bluff because if it hits us with Leech Seed, that could actually be a massive issue. So we just have to knock that Pokemon out as well. So I guess we go Barrier on the Blossom. Now we can return in order to knock that Pokemon out. And I'm just going Barrier so that I do less damage when I hit myself. Return actually one-shots the Victory Bell there though. So we finally managed to win against Erica. That was not pretty. That was not a fight that I feel great about in spite of the fact that everything was a one-hit KO, which is a really rare feeling in the world of Pokemon. Like usually, once you get a Pokemon in the range where it just one-shots everything on the opponent's team, you're feeling amazing. I mean, it's basically what speedrunners dream of, is a run where you just hit everything and it just goes down with no need to set up anything, no need to calculate ranges. But this is probably the single slowest one-hit KO fest that I've ever been a part of in my life. Like, I'm saving here just because I'm worried about possibly losing to this level 35 Machamp, in spite of the fact that my Pokemon is 16 levels higher. Just because, you know, it could happen. Of course, once we land the return, it's an easy one-hit KO victory, but still, that is not a situation where I feel comfortable, even when I know that I should have a massive advantage. And after completing the whole power plant quest, I still think that I'm gonna have trouble maybe going up here to take on Misty, because we have to fight all these randos to break up her date. But I'm just gonna try it because we're at such a high level that none of these fights should be hard. But in particular, I'm really worried about this back-to-back battle here, just because we don't get a heal between, and we therefore effectively have to get through like 3 Pokemon rather than just 2. This could make this one kind of random as well. In fact, I miscounted, it's 4 Pokemon here, which makes this even more random, but we managed to get through the first fight without ever hitting ourselves in confusion. So now we just need to get the luck here against this Nidoking, where return is an easy one-hit KO. So we finally managed to get through all of that section and get to Misty. It wasn't pretty, even with our massive level advantage, but we do get the job done. We can break up Misty's date. She's going to say, "What the heck are you doing? You must be Berserk coming up here." we're going to say, little did you know. It's time to get in her gym and just see if we can completely destroy her. We've got the Thunder Punch, so I think that's good for basically everything other than Quagsire. And for Quagsire, maybe, just maybe, the return is enough. So let's see how this goes. Of course, she has a 4 Pokemon team, so we're going to need to land 4 hits here. First up on the Golduck, we hit ourselves in confusion and it goes Psych Up against us. And we hit ourselves a couple times before we can actually hit the Thunder Punch. Starmie comes out next. We hit ourselves in confusion and then Surf defeats us. Still, I'm imagining Starmie is probably a one-hit KO at the very least with our return. So let's just see how it actually goes in this next attempt. We hit Golduck the first turn. Thunder Punch is in fact a one-hitter on Starmie, at least with the crit. Quagsire comes out next. I'm going to go for return here as it goes for Amnesia and then Rain Dance. Finally, return does hit though, and that is a one-hit KO, and we can Thunder Punch on the Lapras. It barely survives. Return might have been the play here. We actually hit return the next turn though, so we beat Misty on the second attempt. Not as bad as I thought, given that she has 4 Pokemon, but it's still very, very much luck-based to get through that. And after getting Misty done and remembering to go back and get the radio card, we can finally come here and wake up this Snorlax. And I heard a lot of people on the videos saying that we need to do the leftover Snorlax from the beginning in order to see just how good this Pokemon would be with its kind of signature held item. So I think that should be an upcoming video. We've got a Lucky Egg Chansey to do, and we've got a Earthquake Gligar to do, just because those are other special Pokemon in this generation. But I think that the leftovers Snorlax is gonna have to come in as well. Now I'm gonna try to dodge Beedrill Boy here as I make my way up to Brock, and I'm just gonna test him out one time here at least. This is a Pokemon against whom return isn't really going to be a great move, so I think we finally have a spot to add on Psychic, giving us a 100% accurate same type move. I'm just going to learn it over Fire Punch for now, since we don't really need that move right now. Though I don't know, actually learning it over Thunder Punch makes more sense. Fire Punch is primarily to help us against the Exeggutor that I know is coming up in a short while. It's probably better to have access to this move than that. So let's just get into the fights here in Brock's gym and see if we can actually manage to win within a reasonable number of resets. Now Brock leads off with his Graveler, of course. Against this Pokemon, the best play is to go Psychic. We do land it and get the one-hit KO, of course. Amistar comes out next. Psychic is a one-hitter on that Pokemon as well. The Rhyhorn, we hit ourselves in confusion, and then it hits the Earthquake, and then it hits Earthquake again after we hit ourselves, so we simply go down. So this is a spot where setting up Barrier makes a lot of sense. They're going to use physical moves against us anyway, and then after setting up all the barriers, we can go Psychic. But now if we do hit ourselves, we're going to do significantly less damage. We managed to knock out the Amistar and get back to the Rhyhorn again. This time Psychic just lands the first turn and knocks that Pokemon out. Onix comes out next. We finally hit ourselves in confusion and it uses Sandstorm, but Psychic lands the next turn, getting us to the final Pokemon, the Kabutops, and we hit ourselves in confusion. It goes Surf. We take Sandstorm damage, but then we do manage to land the Psychic and win against Brocky Boy. So it only took a couple of attempts there. Basically, the strategy, set up the barrier. Once you get a run where you actually set up barrier properly, you're basically good to go. But now with that done, we can make our way down to Cinnabar Island. We can terrify Blue with our Berzerk Mewtwo. He remembers what Mewtwo did to him in the anime, by the way, defeating 2 of his Pokemon at the same time. Like, he totally tried to cheat like Team Rocket and still got beaten. So he knows that this is going to be a tough fight if we actually land the hits, but he can take advantage of our crazy Pokemon to probably beat us a bunch of times if I have to guess. But before that, we're going to come here and take on Blaney Boy and just see how this fight goes. He's got 3 Pokemon, so we should hit ourselves on average 3 times in confusion. We would survive in that case, but let's see what kind of damage we actually do. For the Magcargo, of course, Psychic is the play because it resists return. But after that, I think return the whole way is the way to go. We get a Sunny Day from the Magmar, then it lands the Fire Punch that's powered up, and we hit ourselves 3 times in a row and then get knocked out. 2 attempts later, we're back to Magmar, but we're burned and on low health, so only Psychic could possibly get us through, and the burn plus hitting ourselves is too much. This time we do land Return on Magmar though. It's an easy one-hit KO as we get to Rapidash. So we just need to land a hit. We do get it, and we take down Blaine in 4 attempts. So overall, not pretty, but not terrible to get through that fight, and we're ready to move on in the game. I think we're going to Janine, and then it's going to be time to go back and take on Blue. Now, Janine's real issue here is that she has a bunch of Pokemon, so while they're all the weakest of all the Kanto gym leaders, the fact that we can't avoid hitting ourselves in confusion for that many turns is going to make this one pretty terrible. Sure enough, we knock ourselves out on the first Crobat on the first attempt, so we're going to have to hope for better luck than that. I think this is another barrier spot. Yes, she can use Screech, but we're not super worried about that here. If we can just set up the barriers so that we don't do as much damage to ourselves, we should have decent odds after that. Psychic one-shots the Crobat, of course. Ariados comes out next. We land the Psychic and just one-shot that Pokemon. Venomoth comes out. Of course, it knows Double Team. I'm worried about that as we just hit ourselves 3 times in a row in confusion. 4 times even. 5 times even. 6 times even. Like, are you kidding me? The level of luck that we're not getting here. Still, we managed to knock that Pokemon out. Weezing comes out. We hit the Psychic on that one, taking it down. We could level up and learn Mist at level 55. We will not learn Mist. That brings out the second Weezing. It lands a Sludge Bomb that is a critical hit and poisons us, but we managed to land the Psychic and knock it out. So just a couple attempts there on Janine. Really not as bad as I thought it could be given the size of her team. But now we have to go take on Blue, who has 6 Pokemon, and I'm not sure if they're all going to be one-shots. We may need some moveset upgrades here, at least in order to make this go. There's only one way to find out though, so I'm going to go and take it on right now. So Blue attempt number 1. Of course, he leads off with the Pidgeot, so this is a spot where we definitely want to set up our barriers. Since Pidgeot is a physical attacker, it just makes too much sense. It mirror moves barrier, but that's really not too bad for us. I think we can just go Psychic here, and it's not quite a one-hitter, but at least with all the barriers set up, we're not doing nearly as much damage to ourselves, and we knock it out a couple turns later. Out comes the Alakazam now. We're trying to go for the return. Once we manage to hit it, of course, that is a one-hit KO. Right on out next, we're going to go back to Psychic here as we get hit by Fury Attack a couple times after hitting ourselves. Psychic does manage to get the one-hitter there, though, so we have taken that Pokemon down. We're going to go Return on the Gyarados. It is not a one-hitter as we get Hydro Pumped, and he full restores on his Gyarados, and we simply go down immediately after that. So we need a stronger move for Gyarados if we're going to get through. That makes me think that Fire Punch needs to go, and we need to try a stronger move for specifically Gyarados, which of course is Thunder Punch. So back for round 2, let's just see if we can set up the barriers again here. Instead, we hit ourselves in confusion, and we're going to need a lot of luck to get through here after hitting ourselves even on that first turn. Now, it's worth seeing what Thunder Punch does. It does one-shot there against the Pidgeot. Now we're going for Return again on the Alakazam if we can actually manage to move. Instead, we get knocked out by its Psychic. A couple attempts later, we're back to the Alakazam with all the barriers set up, and Return will knock it out, still on green health as we go to the Rhydon. We know Psychic is the play here. It goes Sandstorm after we hit ourselves the first turn in confusion, though we do knock it out after that. Gyarados comes out, and now we've got to go for the Thunder Punch. That is an easy one-hit KO after getting to that Pokemon. We're still stuck in a Sandstorm as we get to Exeggutor, but we hit Return. That is a one-hitter, so we've made it to Arcanine, but the Sandstorm ends us. Sandstorm obviously does a fixed percentage, which is why it was so strong there even after we set up all the barriers. So we now basically know that if we get hit by Sandstorm, we can basically just reset on the run because that's going to be enough to prevent us from winning. But this is another spot where I think at this point we've basically got everything in a one-hit KO range, so I don't think that we need to go and gain any additional levels here. It's all just about actually landing the hits. This time we do knock out the Rhydon on the first turn there. We're already down on yellow health though, due to just hitting ourselves a ton of times on the first Pidgeot, and now we're on super low health after the Hydro Pump from this Gyarados. We do manage to knock it out, but we're going to have to hit 2 turns in a row in order to actually win this fight, and we do not get it. A couple attempts later, we do get back to Exeggutor. I actually went YOLO and didn't use any barriers here, so we hit ourselves in confusion as Exeggutor takes in Sunlight and then knock ourselves out the next turn. Back again to Gyarados at about 100 HP remaining. We land the Thunder Punch this time. We're on to the Exeggutor. We go for return. We hit ourselves. It takes in Sunlight. We hit return the next turn though, only for it to not be a one-hit KO. So this might actually be a situation where we can't reasonably win, just given the sheer amount of luck that this takes. There's honestly only one strategy that I can think of that might enable us to get through. That, of course, is the rest strat. Basically, the logic here is I'm simply going to forget Thunder Punch for now. Yes, I know that we were using it on that Gyarados, but the idea, honestly, is that we use rest in order to heal up after setting up our 3 barriers, and hopefully periodically throughout the fight we can use that move in order to heal up effectively so that we actually can, survive enough turns. So it makes us care a little bit less if we get hit by this Pidgeot or if we hit ourselves in confusion, because all we need to do is get the 3 barriers set up there, and then we're just trying to rest here. Obviously, then when we wake up, we'll go for Psychic just because Pidgeot was mirror moving our barrier. That brings us back to Alakazam, against whom we can go for return. And now we've made it to Rhydon, where I'm just going to go for the Psychic. When it hits Sandstorm, though, I think this might be a spot to rest again, just because we can hit ourselves multiple turns in confusion, but we really just want to stall out that Sandstorm. Of course, he just sets up Sandstorm again as soon as it finishes, so no luck getting through with that. Still, we're on better health, so I'm going to try to go for return here against the Gyarados. Instead, we hit ourselves in confusion and then get knocked out. This time, we do manage to knock out the Rhydon, though, so we've made it back to the Gyarados, where we're going to go for Psychic still. It hits the Hydro Pump and does massive damage after the Rain Dance and just knocks us out because we couldn't land a single hit there. Still, while this strategy makes us a little bit less YOLO on this, it's still not super consistent by any means, and we keep getting knocked out as we go through, even with the rest strats on. It seems like Blue is spamming crits, kind of like he always seemed to do against me in Gen 1, and of course the crits seem to not really care too much about all of our barriers being set up. So going for the sweep might be our best chance here. We do manage to once again get to the Exeggutor this time. It takes in Sunlight. We've got 2 HP remaining, and we just don't get anywhere near the one-hit KO there to knock that Pokemon out. Back to Gyarados again. It misses. We hit it after the full restore and knock it out in a single hit with a crit this time. So back to Exeggutor on better health at least. So while yes, this is a 2-hit KO and he does manage to Leech Seed us, we managed to hit him again after he uses his full restore, and we really just need to land one more hit. We managed to finally knock that Pokemon out. That brings out the Arcanine, and I think we just have to go for return and pray here we don't get the range and the flamethrower ends us. So yet again, not a one-hitter on that Pokemon. Now we're only finishing that battle at level 56. So we're gaining like 1 level in this fight. It might be worth it to just start slamming rare candies here, just because it seems a little sus that we're actually going to be able to get through while the last 3 Pokemon are not one-hit KOs. And this isn't going to affect our final level that much. So I'm just going to go to level 60 here. Let's see what that does to the ranges in this one. Here, at least Psychic does one-shot against the Pidgeot. Of course, Return still takes down Alakazam. We would expect Psychic to still be good here when it actually hits the Rhydon. But now we've made it back to Gyarados. Let's see what happens when we use Return here. Now this is a one-hit with a crit at least. We've made it back to Exeggutor, and we don't manage to get a hit to see the range this time, but it still could have worked out. We'll just have to see. One attempt later, we get back to Gyarados and we don't quite get the one-hitter, but this could be a range on this Pokemon, just given how close that was. And sure enough, the next hit, we do knock it out. So that's a range on Gyarados now at level 60. And yet again, we just don't get a C on Exeggutor. This time we do land return on the Exeggutor and we see that it survived on 8 HP. So yet again, this is a spot that could very much be a range. He full restores and I think our only chance here is to rest. We simply couldn't use the move and we go down. We get back to Exeggutor on green health a couple attempts later. Here we do land return and it is a one-hit KO that time. So clearly a range on the Exeggutor. That brings out the final Arcanine. We hit ourselves. It hits the flamethrower, but it was in the range, so it did less damage. And then we hit return and actually one-shot there. So at level 60, we are able to come into this fight, knock out the rivals Pokemon, all in one-hit KOs. Some are ranges, but we gained 1 level in that fight. So even though we used all those rare candies before this fight, the result is effectively the same for our final level going into the red fight, because we would have just gained 1 level in the fight before. We gained 1 level in the fight here. So basically it's a wash, and we're just going to have to see if we can find any way through red, because if blue was that hard, red might just actually be impossible, or at least as close to impossible as impossible can be. But who knows, maybe we can find a way to one-shot a bunch of Pokemon here. We're definitely going to be slamming all of the rare candies before we go into this fight though, because that's our only chance, I think, to actually make this one work. And this could be a rare case where we actually want to get charmed by the Pikachu and we could throw on a special move in the place of return. The question is just what move would we want to learn? I'm thinking it could actually be something like Thunderbolt or Blizzard or something, depending on where we actually struggle here. So let's try this currently as we are, but with all the rare candies on, and then we'll think about moveset changes if it proves necessary. No matter what, we're coming into this fight at level 66 with our Berzerk Mew, and let's see if we can get it to go. So red attempt number 1, I think we just go return on this first Pikachu. Sure enough, we knock it out nice and easy. That brings out Espeon, where I think the play is still return, because I don't think we want to get hit by a bunch of mud slaps there. So now we've made it to Snorlax, who's basically going to be using a physical damage dealing move here. I think we barrier right here. We can rest to get rid of paralysis. So I think this is the play. Sure enough, we do get paralyzed, but I'm just once again going to rest here if I get the chance. In fact, I'm going to try to return once here just to see if he will use rest. Finally, we do manage to rest in order to recover our HP, and he rests as well to recover his HP. Of course, he's doing damage with Snore while he's asleep, so I end up resting again because I got paralyzed. Here we do manage to knock him out, though still on green health. That brings out the Charizard, where I'm just going to stick with return here. We take a big flamethrower, but after that, when we hit the return, it's going to be a 2-hit KO on this Pokemon, and we simply go down. So a few attempts later, we get back to Charizard, but it doesn't matter. We simply get knocked out because we didn't have enough HP. But now, of course, if we went back and sold all the items and gambled at the game corner for a long time in Goldenrod, then it is possible for this Pokemon to get access to the move Thunderbolt. And Thunderbolt might be the solution to our problem. It's probably going to one-shot both that Charizard and the Blastoise, meaning there might only be one Pokemon that needs 2 hits, and that's very likely to be the Venusaur. Venusaur loves to set up Sunny Day, so this actually could be a situation where Thunderbolt is the solution to make this one work. Let's get into it and find out. So back to Charizard. Let's see if we can land the Thunderbolt here. We do, and that is not quite a one-hit KO. We do manage to knock that Pokemon out though, only to knock ourselves out against the Blastoise. But the question is that just a bad range on the Charizard, or is it actually always going to be a 2-hitter there? And it appears that it's going to be a 2-hitter there because we got a worse range this time. This time we do manage to get the Charizard on full health at least, only to simply go down there. So this makes me think that there is one last strategy that we can use. Obviously there's a stronger move to use against the Charizard, and that move of course is Thunder. Basically same thing, go to the Goldenrod game corner, only this time instead of saving up your coins to buy Thunderbolt, you save them up in order to buy Thunder. And if we can actually manage to get a shot at the Charizard, Thunder should be strong enough if it hits to actually get the one-hit KO. Then we just have to see about Blastoise. And of course, the final Venusaur, we're just gonna basically YOLO it there with the return strats. So once again, we're back to Charizard on full health. We land the Thunder, allowing us to one-shot that Pokemon. Blastoise comes out. We hit ourselves in confusion. We get hit by Surf. We hit ourselves again, and once again, Surf knocks us out. So we're gonna need better luck than that in order to get through this one. But now I think everything other than Venusaur and Snorlax should be one-hit KOs. So it takes a ton of attempts to get back to Charizard. We hit the Thunder. That brings out Blastoise again. We need the luck to actually land a hit here. We hit ourselves in confusion. It Rain Dances. That means that if we had managed to use the Thunder, it would have hit because Rain Dance would guarantee that. But we just could not get the luck to actually move against that Pokemon. It takes quite a few attempts, but we finally get one where we get the Charizard on full health, knock it out with the Thunder. We've made it to Blastoise on full health. We hit ourselves in confusion turn 1. It uses Rain Dance. We hit ourselves turn 2. It uses Surf. We finally move turn 3, allowing us to not quite knock that Pokemon out. This is probably a range. Oh, that's terrible. We got all the way there with the Thunder, only to find that it was not a one-hit KO. Back to Blastoise again. Let's see if we can find out if this was actually a range or if it's just a pure two-hit KO here. We land the Thunder this time, and we get an even worse range with it remaining with 33 HP remaining. It does get paralyzed, but it's not fully paralyzed, and it knocks us out. So it's possible that we got the best possible roll that first time. It's also possible that we got an even worse range this last time, and that we still have a decent chance of getting the one-hit KO there. Of course, I don't use damage calculators, so I don't know exactly, which is why I have to try that a few times in order to actually assess it. Back to Blastoise again. We land Thunder turn 1 this time. It holds on with 6 HP and goes for Rain Dance. I'm going to go Return to knock that Pokemon out. So we've actually made it to Venusaur on full health. Obviously, Return is the only play here. It's going to be a two-hitter as it goes Sunny Day, but we actually managed to move that last turn. So after 116 resets on Red, granted testing a few different moves, but still, even once we change to Thunder, tons of resets, we actually do manage to get through Red with no damage. So it's that simple. This Mewtwo, if it was not confused constantly, I feel like we would have gotten through Red at most a few attempts once we added on a move like Thunderbolt or Thunder. But the confusion, basically making it a 50-50 shot that you hit yourself every turn with your boosted attack stat, or that you deal, maybe a little bit more damage with the return than you would be doing with your, super effective special moves. Yeah. It's just really not that great with this Mewtwo. That has got to be the single worst Mewtwo run that I've done since the time that I tried to beat Gen 1 with a Mewtwo with only 20 base power moves. And again, it makes really, really clear why they effectively just took this held item out of the game completely and just from Gen 3 onward just scrapped it. The Berzerker Gene is absolutely terrible. Terrible, I say. But we did manage to beat the game on minimum battles with a Mewtwo. Not pretty, but again, I mean, what were we going to do? We were just going to have to go grind levels, I guess, until we could one-shot there. Really, you'd want to grind levels until you could one-shot with Thunderbolt because relying on the Thunder there is terrible. But that's basically it. Outside of that, Rest and Barrier at least are a strat to try to reduce the amount of damage you do to yourself and heal up. But in the end, I found that it was better to just go YOLO and just go all in on attack, because all those extra turns are just more chances for you to get paralyzed, take a little damage from the opponents, etc. And you're not really getting any benefit out of it. At the end of the day, it's just your moves either hit and knock your opponents out, or you hit yourself in confusion and you lose that way. So yeah. This Pokemon was brutal. We got it to go. I appreciate you guys for being here. I want to give a massive thank you to everybody who's been following this series. These videos have been doing pretty awesomely, like GSC videos performing almost like an RBY video, which is incredible. And the channel members, I just can't thank you guys enough for your support. I'm getting very close to my goal of being a full-time PokeTuber, and we're going to have more ridiculous runs like this. So if that's something that interests you, consider joining that channel membership to help me out so that we can make more of these. Anyway, appreciate you. I'll see you in the next one. Later.